Get 5 coffins ready.
Hey everyone, welcome to my guide for Neith. Neith is viable in the mid lane and carry roles and has a ton of burst damage with one of the most unique global ultimates in the game, and like Ymir's wall last time, is something no character in her class can hope to match. Neith's builds line right up with this, full power with the hope of bursting people down so fast they say, whoa, that was fast. Cooldown reduction to me is the biggest thing you can go for on Neith, as that ultimate is just ridiculous in the early and mid game, and in the late game too, but less so. Relics wise, it's just beats and Aegis. Neith really needs both, especially beats since she has no built-in CC immunity. Shard wise, just Wing Shard will do, but if you're really all inning on that damage, Claw Shard isn't bad. Then for recipe, definitely just Bountiful Bow. She's one of the hunters who uses it the best. Let's get to Neith's passive. Every time an enemy god dies, a weave is left behind. Neith can interact with these with her abilities like her first ability. Neith fires a projectile which will go through all walls and all enemies, and damage as well as root all enemies hit. This ability has a relatively low cooldown given its impact, so that makes it a great combo with Bountiful Bow. The ability is obviously her wave clear ability, but it's one of the strongest non-ultimate projectiles in the game. You want to clear waves with this, obviously, but Neith being able to, at any time, given the range of this ability, simply clip the enemy lane opponent to get some free basic attacks on them, thanks to them being rooted into place, is a huge pressure factor in Neith's favor. Don't forget that this ability can be used over walls too, so if things are going well for your team and you're chasing enemies down, you can fire it over walls for a long range route as well. And even better, Neith has the absolute perfect ability to follow this up with, her second ability. Neith winds up, then deals damage in a circle AoE on the ground, and she will heal for every enemy inside the AoE. Enemy minions deal the normal heal amount, but healing off of a passive weave or enemy gods will result in double the heal amount, with enemy god heals also granting a flat 25% attack speed step, while reducing the enemy's attack speed by that same 25%. And this ability has the classic limitations of only being able to heal off of 3 minions total in a single cast. But of course, you can heal off of 3 minions plus any number of enemy gods inside the second ability's AoE. A loaded ability then, but clearly a simple one. It goes hand in hand with her first ability, lots of damage and a bit of sustain on top. Then once you start getting your damage online, you can focus on hitting some of the wave with your first ability, then the rest of it on your enemy lane opponent, then 2ing on top of them to give yourself an attack speed boost while reducing their attack speed for a clear swing in your favor. This of course assuming you can actually hit your basic attacks. That mindset applies as well when using this ability on its own. Naturally early on, or in some matchups when the enemy lane opponent also has strong wave clear, you need to focus on using your entire first ability to clear the wave. And then, this ability will be your only tool for dealing damage to the enemy lane opponent. Now don't get me wrong, there are times when you can 2 the enemy lane opponent, then just walk up for some free basic attacks. And you should look to do that as Neith, but since she's not the safest character in the game, sometimes the best thing you can do is just 1 the wave to clear, and then just 2 the enemy lane opponent while walking away for some free poke and sustain. You can keep in mind as well, 2ing the enemy lane opponent still reduces their attack speed, so if they try to call you out in your retreat, and then they get aggressive, they still have that reduced attack speed and can easily lose the trade if they get overzealous. And actually, once this ability reaches its maximum rank and you have some power online, you can actually use this ability to clear the wave instead of your first ability, leaving you to sustain off of every single wave and then use your first ability purely for poke damage, or vice versa, depending on the matchup whether you want to reduce their attack speed to trade or just deal that raw damage. Still though, if you yourself go the aggressive route, you have to keep the casting time of this ability in mind, as while Neith is free to move around while casting her 2, she can't basic attack or use any of her other abilities, so depending on the matchup, using her 2 aggressively may just be the opening that your opponent was waiting for, perhaps trying to interrupt the ability with CC, but more than likely using that time while you're casting your 2 to simply rain down some ability damage on you, since obviously, if they're more ability reliant, they don't need that attack speed that you just took for them to throw some abilities on you. Keep the fact that you can just 2 and then immediately walk away to create some distance in the back of your mind whenever you go for this ability. And also, when Neith can't use her first ability for damage, she can struggle in a one-on-one fight, but especially in fights where she's getting ganked by the enemy support or jungler, mostly due to the shortcomings of her third ability. Neith deals damage in slows in a wide cone AoE in front of herself, and leaps slowly a set distance behind herself, and dare I say most importantly, leaves one of her passive weaves behind in the location where she left from. So this is the best worst ability ever. For one, it's probably the worst movement ability in the game in the Hunter class, that is when you're talking about purely as a movement ability. A sluggish leap that cannot go over walls and can only ever go directly behind where Neith is looking. That is to say, anyone who's diving you knows exactly where you're leaping to. With other leaps you have the benefit of A, going over walls, and 2, changing the angle and range of the leap to either throw enemies off or give yourself a better chance of survival. Or just to leap in, which is something Neith can't really do. Well, she can, but she has to turn around and then slowly leap toward enemies for aggression. And don't forget, leaping in like this means you lose access to the damaging portion of this ability. But let's stop with the negativity for a moment and talk about that damage portion. It goes without saying that the damage and slowing portion is the easiest thing in the world to hit, but obviously you need to be in rather close range to use it. The damage and slow actually works well when chasing kills, allowing Neith to finish off enemies with this ability, and if it didn't finish them off, well, they're slowed, allowing her to easily 1 or 2 or just basic attack them to death. That's not really how you use this ability aggressively though. As you may remember, Neith leaves a passive weave on the ground. Now comes the fun part on Neith. When Neith hits one of these passive weaves with her first ability, the weave will explode, dealing damage in an AoE this time and rooting just like her first ability. And yes, you can stack this first ability and the AoE damage on top of one another for insane damage numbers. And I didn't really mention this interaction before, because you can't really rely on the weaves that enemy gods leave behind when they die. I mean, who knows where they're going to be placed. Your second ability has that interaction too though, where Neith gets a bonus heal, but she doesn't gain any attack speed from that, but it does allow her to heal more than 3 times off of a wave. That is, you 3 in front of the wave, and then you 2 for exceptional sustain. That opens up a great mind game though. You 3 the wave, but what now? Are you going to 1 the wave to completely demolish it, then look for some aggression with your second ability? Or will you simply walk up back to the wave, begin basic attacking it, leaving not only your first ability up, but also your tool to give yourself a huge heal if the enemy lane opponent tries to take a trade with you? A weave being on the ground is a great pressure tool because while Neith can only interact with it in one of 2 ways, those 2 ways include giving herself a massive heal or dealing massive hard to avoid damage. The one very obvious flaw attached to all this is that it's Neith's only movement ability, and as I already mentioned, it's a pretty poor one at that. So you really want to go for this weave mind game against your opponents, but you need to know both what your matchups are, as in can you actually perform this mind game and win a trade without your movement ability, and not just kinda die, and you need to know where the enemy jungler and support are, so they won't just jump on you right after your leap. Because if you're against more than one person at a time as Neith, it's over, you can't really win him. This is largely because Neith's finishing move when it comes to both defense and offense is her ultimate. Neith roots herself in place and enters a channeled state, and even if she doesn't have a target, she will still begin charging the ultimate. Neith can select any enemy god she currently has vision on with this ultimate, no matter how far away they are from her. But they need to be targetable, meaning that gods like Surtur, Chernobog, or Nuwa who fly into the air and become immune will not be targetable by this ability while they're immune. Neith can cancel out of the channeling at any time, or alternatively, can fire the ability at any time by pressing the basic attack button. When activated, Neith fires a projectile which will pass through all walls and minions, traveling to its destination target, and gods who enter those immune states that I mentioned earlier while the arrow is traveling towards them will have the arrow just kinda wait around for them. The arrow will still hit them as soon as they're not immune anymore. When the arrow hits, it will damage and stun the affected target, the damage and the stun duration of course depending on how long the ability was charged for. That said though, the arrow is still a projectile, and it can be body blocked by an enemy teammate. Whether they mean to or not is a different story. But as you saw, when an enemy is targeted by Neith's ultimate, they'll have a very clear red indicator appear around them, so any nearby teammates can just walk right in front of whoever you're trying to hit and body block it. Although mind you, they will of course still take the full stun and damage. You could always get it body blocked accidentally, which is always a funny time, but it's a rarity of course. But it is something to keep in mind while playing Neith in case you're threading the needle on a target across the map. An insane ability that's completely unmatched in SMITE, even after 11 years with Neith in the game. So how do you use it? It's pretty much the most flexible ability in the game since it can be used anywhere at any time, and you should always be looking for opportunities to use your ult to help your team as soon as you hit level 5. Neith's not one of my top picks for new players ADCs since she dies to gank so easily, but the one thing she does do well is force you to learn to watch the minimap, and read what your teammates are doing from across the map. It's something you should be doing all the time in every single role, but Neith requires this from you, as this ability, unlike most hunter abilities, is a tool to assist your team, not just yourself. Watch your teammates closely. Is your mid laner okay? Do they need you to ult someone so you can peel for them? Or your jungler, are they about to gank someone? How quickly can that character engage so that I'm not just sitting there charging my ult hoping I don't get dunked on? And so on. Other uses of this ability are much easier and require far less game sense from you as a Neith player. During teamfights, someone's running away after your team gets a combo, ult them to either stop them from running away with the stun or just outright kill them. Lest we forget peeling for your teammates as well. If someone gets picked way out in the jungle, and nobody on your team is close enough to peel for them, Neith can do something no other god in the game can do, and stun one of those enemies who's trying to pick your teammates to give them a chance to survive without actually putting herself in any danger. The Achilles heel of this ability though is that, while Neith can use this ability at huge ranges to keep herself safe, if anybody's even remotely close to Neith while she starts charging the ultimate, she's getting jumped on like no tomorrow, and it can be very easy to die just by charging the ultimate for funsies during the laning phase if you do it at the wrong time. So always be on the lookout to use this ability to assist your team, but remember that if you mirror a tank rooting himself in place makes him easy to kill, then you as a squishy hunter rooting yourself in place is a very, very bad thing. Of course this ability can be used as self-peel, but thanks to that whole rooting yourself in place thing, you have to do so very carefully. Focus on self-peeling with your first ability and running away with your third ability. Use your ultimate as self-peel as the last possible option. Let's get to some combos as Neith. 1, 2. 3, 1, 2. 1, 3, 2. Ult 1, 2, and either 3 to finish him off, or leap on in there. For ability leveling, you're 1 level 1, you're 2 at level 2, and you're 3 at level 3. For the Mary Max, you're 1, you're 2, then you're 3, leveling the ultimate whenever you can. Neith is a classic god in SMITE with a lot of strengths but a lot of flaws. It's very easy to get monumental leads as Neith and just have it amount to nothing because she gets folded like a lawn chair by basically any jungler in the game. And don't get me wrong, with her 1, 3, and ultimate to peel for herself, absolutely one-on-one she can save herself or even kill that enemy jungler. But add the enemy ADC to the mix and yeah, Neith's not living, since all 3 of her self-peel abilities can really only work on one enemy at a time. That is, so long as the enemy team doesn't just line up for you. So Neith's in this really weird position, where she has a disgustingly strong laning phase and can completely dominate her lane opponent, but as soon as she gets contested on anything when she's outnumbered, she has to give it up unless she has some teammates nearby. And don't get me wrong, 9 out of 10 ADCs are reliant on their teammates nearby to function, but Neith just takes this to a whole nother level, being absolutely worthless unless she has teammates to peel for her. But when you do though, you get that strong laning phase, you get your power items, help a few ganks and save a few teammates with your ultimate, and have a support player with eyeballs so they know to help you. Neith can outrange and outdamage just about any hunter, and a good amount of mages too when she's allowed to actually sit there and use her abilities. Neith is risky then, but when you pull her off, she can have some of the most satisfying explosive plays out of any hunter, both when it comes to peeling for her team or absolutely annihilating the enemy backline with a late game ult or weave explosion. All that despite her overall simplicity and ease of use. That's all I have on Neith for now. Thanks for watching.